Welcome to Champaign County Agriculture Today. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Dennis Riggs, a fourth-generation farmer here in Champaign County, currently a member of the Champaign County Farm Bureau Board of Directors. We're glad you're here today as we talk about agriculture. It's an interesting industry that's right here in our backyard in Champaign County, and it's a multi-faceted industry with many things to think about, and you may have questions about it, and we hope to answer those in the next 30 minutes. With me today, I have two gentlemen that have taken their time to come in and talk to us today. On my immediate left here is Chris Hausman. Chris is a farmer down in the Pasodum area. Chris, have you always farmed? Is that something you've always done all your life?
Yeah, I've pretty well farmed since I was very small. I've done some other things before I started farming full time, but currently I'm farming approximately 1,200 acres in the Pasodum area. And I started farming full time in 1991 when my dad retired. And also, like you, Dennis, I'm a fourth generation farmer. Hopefully one of our sons, I have three sons, maybe one of those might be the fifth generation. We don't know for sure at this point, but farming's been in my blood and I've always enjoyed it, and I think it's a great way of life.
Great. Well, thanks for coming in today and help us talk more about agriculture. We also have with us from the University of Illinois Farm Business Farm Management, Mr. Mitch Fruehling. Mitch, farm business, farm management, that sounds like an interesting mix of lots of things. Tell me about your job and what about the organization?
Dennis, pleasure to be with you today. Dennis, I am an area advisor for Farm Business Farm Management, FBFM. Dennis, we work directly statewide. I'm fortunate enough to be here in Champaign County. We have 6,000 or so cooperators here in the state that we work directly with, analyzing their business from start to finish. Throughout the year, I work with 120 directly here in Champaign County. We do analyze business from planning, do tax work with them. At the end of the year, we'll look at their financial, how their growth has been for financially throughout the year, look at strengths, weaknesses, how we can improve the business, all with their help. At the end of the year, we'll help them, assist them in getting their financial statements, their balance sheets, everything put together, anything that they might need for their lenders.
Well, Mitch, rumor has it that in the garage of your home there's a tractor. Now, do you have a farm background also?
I do. I raised on a farm several years ago, but I do have my dad's first 1951 tractor restored in my garage.
Fantastic.
Thanks for asking.
Get that out every once in a while.
And that's something.
Well, production agriculture here in Champaign County might be a little bit different than other places around our country. Chris, give us an idea about your operation. Crops, livestock, vegetables. I mean, what do you grow on your farm?
We grow mainly corn and soybeans, which is a fairly typical farm in Champaign County. And as you go around in the county, that's mainly what you're going to find is corn and soybeans. We have actually, though, we do grow quite a bit of a food grade corn that goes into a chip product. And so that's kind of a specialty crop that we've been raising and have been, I feel, very successful in that part. But mainly corn and soybeans in our neck of the woods, and that's pretty well it for our type of agriculture.
Well, Mitch, you see a lot of farmers in many parts of the area. Tell us about, is there such thing as an average farm? 2.7 cows or 500.2 acres. What is the average farm? And tell us about the mix between crop production and livestock production.
Dennis, livestock has, unlike Chris, who has his operation, I'm real blessed to have looked at 120 operations, and each one of those is unique and distinctly different from the one before it. They have their own characteristics. They have their own little niche. True, a lot of them raise corn and soybeans, but our livestock has dwindled down here in Champaign County, where a couple of decades ago everyone had a few cattle running around and maybe a couple of swine running around. And 30 or 40 years ago we had just enough maybe to have a few chickens even running around, so we'd have a dozen eggs for our family. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much all went away from the wayside now. That's all pretty much gone away. But there still is a few livestock operations here in the county. But what's in the county and what's in East Central Illinois is big, and they're intense. And and they're pretty well specialized, and they know what they're doing, and they have big, huge numbers. So there is still some of that around. The average size farm, to answer that question, we're probably approaching here in Champaign County an average size, Vermilion County, that size area, probably somewhere around 1,000, 1,200 acre farm.
But within that, what is the minimum and what is the maximum? What's the range of those numbers?
Oh, I'll still have a client that I have a 400 acre farm, have major off farm employment. We still have, unlike 20 years ago where we had no non-farm income, today, well, our averages are approaching $30,000, $40,000 of that 400 or 500 acre farm now. We'll have non-farm income of $30,000 or $40,000. So we've got a combination of both still going on, and that's how that 500 acre farm still exists, with a $50,000 or $40,000 of non-farm income. And then the range up is up. It can be 2 or 3 or 4 or 6,000 acres, although the 6,000 acres aren't very many in number, but there are a few around.
Well, the reason we're doing this program, why the Farm Bureau is bringing this program to people, is because the stereotypical farming and the farming couple, and we have a slide number 4, that may be something that we remember a few years back as far as the farmer. There they are. They're the typical couple. They've got the pitchfork, they're out the old farmstead. But that has changed a whole lot. Chris, the slide that we saw there with the older farm couple, were you ever in that type of operation?
That was before my generation, so I'm not quite that old, but no, that's something that's an old stereotypic view of a farm couple. But I can still remember my mom and dad and my grandparents, very hardworking. They were German immigrants that settled this county, and very, very hardworking people. And so that is what our heritage is, and our farm operation has. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be farming today. And it was handed down from generation to generation, and I think it's sort of you take pride in that. I don't know if it's just that German heritage, but it seems like there is a sense of pride when one generation can successfully transfer that farm to the next generation, and they like to see that continue on and on.
The inward look at the farm and the outside look, the external look at the farm, we'll move ahead to slide number 5. Many times as people are driving through the country, they may see a farmstead along the highway, and they see that house and the crib and the barns and everything sitting out there. It may be the same house that's been there for many years. Chris, I think, isn't that the situation at your farm?
Oh, yes. And when you drive around, you'll see a lot of farmsteads that have evolved and changed over time. Corn cribs that used to have shelled corn stored in them, and I don't know of hardly anybody in our area that puts ear corn in a crib anymore. So you won't see that anymore. A lot of barns that are still standing that are mainly just used for storage now. So yeah, the way the farmstead looked 100 years ago is entirely different today. Mainly you're going to see a building that's used strictly for machinery storage, and that's about it on most modern farms. But the other buildings are kind of just there as kind of a remembrance of the past.
Yeah, it has changed a lot, and a big area is the technology. In many farm operations, of course, farmers always like to adopt new things. They always try to do the best job they can and grow the best crop each year. Mitch, as you see the different farms out there, what types of technology has changed? What are farmers doing different now than maybe of what you've heard of 10, 15 years ago?
Sure, Dennis, we always have that group who, just like in any kind of movement, we have those early adapters, and then we have that big chunk who follow through there. But just a few years ago, we had the changes in herbicides where we had Roundup Ready, that technology that came into play. That early adapters tried that out, and Roundup Ready, for those who are listening, Roundup kills everything but the specific crop that we're growing, and it was a wonderful breakthrough that you could plant a crop out and not have to worry about any grass or anything, and Roundup could get that. Now we're a couple years back, we had technologies that we could We could adjust and see yields in our combines. Our producers could and some of this was even amazing to me as I rode in the fall of the year, could tell what our yields were on our combines as we went through the field, up to the satellite down, and it was measuring feet and telling us what our bushels coming through that machine were. Now we're to the point where we have auto steer, and that's our next technology. Again, back up to the satellite, down to the tractor, and now we're steering within tenths of an inch of keeping our machines on equipment. So that technology, and we thought when we went from the big record books in the late 80s to computers that's as far as we were ever going to go, and now everyone's on the computer system, keeping their records on the computer system.
I think why a lot of people don't see this technology change is because they don't take time to stop at a farm, and that's why we're doing this program today, is to kind of open our operations up to the viewers today. Livestock operations. I get this question quite a bit, and slide number 6 is going to show us a farmer that's growing livestock, except we've got a building now. Mitch, in the old days, the animals were out in the pasture, and you could see when you drove by. What do you see in livestock production today?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Dennis, those livestock operations that we have in Champaign County, they're big, they're specialized. And there's going to be a lot of numbers involved with that, but now they're pretty much got that figured out. Confinement situations, our hog operations are pretty much all confined. We don't have animals being born outside under a tree, but they've got it all figured out pretty well. They've got them all confined in buildings, all taken care of. They're all pretty much got their animals pretty well taken care of. The temperature doesn't change. Don't see a lot of livestock in this part of the county, but it's here. But it's all specialized. That's the key word.
That's the word. Specialization, and also focusing in on doing the best job they can, whether it be on every acre or every animal,
or in every building,
or every building. Put it to work.
Yeah,
Chris, we talk about how we produce. We grow the corn. We grow the livestock. There's a lot of talk about corporate farming. There's a lot of talk about contract farming. Take those two entities and tell us what you know about, let's take corporate farming first of all. What is that all about?
Well, Dennis, I think there's a misconception out there that corporate farming is taking over agriculture, that it's kind of an anti-Enron, anti-corporation, and I think it is a misconception. There are corporations that farm, but a lot of these corporations are family corporations, and they've been formed as corporations for purposes of, as more members have joined the operation, the ease of entry into that operation is added to when they do form a corporation for estate planning purposes to pass that farm on. A lot of times they'll choose a corporation to ease that transfer. But when you really look at the numbers, and I just read an article here not too long ago by Professor Bob Thompson at the University of Illinois, and one number that jumped out is that less than 10% of the agricultural production in this country is done by corporation or corporate entities that are agribusiness corporations. And so it's a very small percentage out there. So there is that misconception that corporations are taking over agriculture. Yes, there's corporations out there, but they're family corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's switch over to the contract farming. And we have a slide that talks about contract farming and talks about the number of acres that are being done by that. Is there contract farming here in Champaign County?
Oh, yes. And that's one area that a lot of farmers, doesn't necessarily mean what size of an operation that you have, but there are things where you can grow specialty soybeans, non-GMO. For the viewer, non-GMO would be non-genetically modified organisms, which means that the Roundup Ready gene has not been inserted into them. There's certain niche markets out there that require a contract for. I grow white corn as a specialty crop that is under contract. So there is a lot of contract farming out there. Is it the majority of farming in Champaign County? No. The majority is not by contract farming, but in the corn soybean area, it is increasing, and I think it's something that's going to increase in the future.
Now, as contract farming, Mitch, I'll go over to you as we take a look at growing a crop, and we've talked before, there's a lot of money on the table when the farmer leaves that field with a planted crop out there. Give me an idea of how many dollars a farmer might have invested in his crop, and then why he would be looking at where that market would be even before that market, the harvest is around the corner.
Yeah, Dennis, I think we talked about or visited a little bit about variable costs could be in the range of $200 or $220 an acre for those variable costs of seed and fertilizer and fuel, anything of those costs that a producer could have some management decisions over and decide when he's going to pay for it, where he's going to purchase it. But those fixed costs also could run up to $180, building cost, land cost, insurance costs, those things that are going to happen whether or not a crop comes or not. So when he knows that those costs are there, he can look at a contract, be it a Frito-Lay contract or be it a seed corn contract or anything like that, and see that that's going to give him a little dab of a premium over what a local elevator would pay him for that particular crop, and see that that's $10 more an acre, $15 more an acre to help cover that input cost that he's got on that particular crop. Anything like that is part of the management that producer goes through.
Mitch, I'd like to ask your opinion because you work with lots of farmers. We see, back to the corporate question again, you go into a lot of either just restaurants or hotels or whatever, you see the plaque on the wall, this facility owned by a certain corporation that might be a family or whatever. Is there a difference between businesses on Main Street that are corporately owned and a business on the farm that a family corporation might own?
That is just a tough question. I'll follow with Chris a little bit. I work with several farms here in Champaign County that are under the entity of an SC or an S corp only because we're working to pass that on, or it's set up in such a structure that there's multiple ownership just because it's easier for bookkeeping purposes or whatever. When I think about a corporate farm, I think about that and the ones that we read about are those hog producers that have multiple buildings in multiple states, that have multiple thousands of heads of hogs, with corporate offices in Des Moines, Iowa, for example, that have a percentage of the total hogs in the whole world. Now that's a corporate. That in my opinion is a corporate farm, not this operation who looks and feels and does everything like a family farm, who is set up under a corporate entity that you or I could set up with just a few little paperwork adjustments. So that's the corporate. That's the corporate difference that I see there that we need to be careful about understanding what that is. Now the mom and dad operation who has a franchise of McDonald's, is that different than my corporate farm? That's a tough one because now they're running business as something under a franchise of something else. So the answer to your question is yes. And also no.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do, and we've talked about this before, is because there's a huge amount of capital involved in that hotel or that restaurant or that farming operation. Then because of the laws of economics and the laws of the tax laws, you have to put those things in place.
That's right.
To manage that business.
So you have to look at that. They're buying into that overall franchise to run that business. So they're buying something to own that franchise to open that store there on that storefront.
But Chris, as you said, truly the clear majority is the family farming operation. We still see that. It's a very small percentage. We have a slide number 8 there that talks about overall trends in U.S. agriculture. What have you noticed as far as the trends? I know you get a chance to travel around with your work in Farm Bureau. You see other farmers in other states, even other countries. What type of trends are you running across?
What I've noticed trend in farming in this particular area is, from a size-wise, what you're seeing is the middle-sized farm, and when I say middle-sized farm, I'm going to say probably in that 500 to 1,500 acre range. Those numbers are probably declining. what you're seeing more is there's an increase in large operations, acreage or continue to expand, and there's probably a bigger increase in the very small numbers of farms. But probably long term, the middle size farm, due to some inefficiencies and things, sometimes can be an awkward size because it's not big enough maybe for two people. And so there's some inefficiencies, but I think non-farm income is going to be a key for success for a lot of these operations where you have an opportunity to have an off-farm income. My wife, for instance, works off the farm here in Champaign-Urbana. She works at the University of Illinois, provides insurance benefits for the family, which is a big benefit. And by doing that, it allows our operation to still be viable. Everything helps, but I think that's probably a trend that's going to continue, where you might see a lot of operations that are 500 to 1,500 acres in size, but they're going to require a spouse or themselves to be working off the farm also to bring additional income into that operation.
So it sounds to me like it's a tough business to get into. And Mitch, I'm going to direct this question to you. It's obvious that if you're born into a family farming operation as a son or a daughter, and we do have many ladies today that are running operations here in Champaign County, that would be one way to be a farmer. I guess if I went out and married a lady that her parents own the farm, that's a way to get into it. Is it true that that it's only a birthright to be able to get into a farming operation in the United States?
Dennis, there's various ways. There's always opportunities to find out, to get the door open. Mm-hmm. There are several situations that come up where a retiring farmer would have a situation where he has no one to turn the farm over to. Has no sons who are interested, has no children who are interested in taking over the operation. We have those situations where that producer is just looking for someone to be an apprentice, for example, to turn that operation over to. The problem with that is that can't happen from year one to year two. That can be a time-consuming effect. Someone really wants to be in farming to want to do that. And the good part about that is there are people who want to do that, mm-hmm. because that takes some time to do that. There's tax consequences involved for that producer to just turn over that operation to that next generation and to happen like that. Someone really wants to do that because those years in between there can be pretty lean. Yeah. Okay, so that can be pretty lean for that. Also, if we're turning it over to a son, we have to think through those aspects of it as well, because does mom and dad want to be fair to that son? Yes, but do we want to be fair to that non-farming siblings? Mm-hmm. The daughter who's in Arizona and the daughter who's in New York and married to someone else, we have to be fair to all of those. So there's all of those things to happen. So it can happen. There's possibilities that always come up. It's a challenging thing for us to work through all those.
I would also add something Mitch mentioned was the son, but I think you're seeing more and more females entering into production agriculture. It's not kind of a male-only club, mm-hmm. That there are more and more women getting involved in production agriculture, and I think that's great.
Chris, what about, I know that you and I kind of work on a larger scale farming type operation, but how about, have you seen some examples of somebody might go out and buy 10 acres and get into very intensive farming, vegetables or other types of farming?
I think you do see, especially in an urban area, Champaign-Urbana is a prime example, that there are some farms that are popping up that are specialty niche markets, organic, for instance, where it might only take 5-10 acres, an orchard, for instance. There's a lot of opportunities out there for people who want to, go out and try to start a niche market to bring fresh produce to a farmer's market, for instance, or an orchard. So in that sense, yes, there's probably a lot of operations that are springing up around urban areas to help fill that market. But yeah, there's always opportunities.
We have examples of pumpkins, and we have examples of Christmas trees, and
There's specialty and/or niche markets where people can get into, not on a large scale, and of course, instead of being more capital intensive, a lot of times they're more labor intensive.
Right.
Well, give us an example as a consumer, Chris. Consumers watching our program today, they don't go to the farm and buy their corn or beef or whatever. They go to the grocery store. As a consumer watching the program today, should they be concerned about where their food's coming from?
Oh, I agree. I think they should be concerned. And I think the American consumer, when they do go to the grocery store, they do realize that they have the safety nets in place, that they have a very safe and affordable food supply provided to them. And American agriculture is part of that. One thing that I think the consumer needs to keep in mind is that dollar spent that goes for purchases of food, only about 19 cents of that actually goes back into the pockets of the farmer. There's a lot of processing costs and labor costs involved in production of and marketing of food. So in our operations where we're producing bulk commodities, we're kind of at the bottom end of that food chain.
Our slide on the screen right now talks about that 19.5 cents that the farmer gets out of that dollar of food cost, and look at all those other things that dollar goes to that have nothing to do with the farmer, out of his control.
Correct. It's one of those things, again, that when we deliver these commodities, we don't get a price given to us to cover what we would like to have for that. We don't negotiate when we deliver our corn and soybeans to the elevator. It'd be nice to go to that elevator manager and say, we need $3 a bushel for this corn to cover all our costs. We're at the mercy of the market. So we have to be good marketers and try to market our crops to try to maximize our net returns. But unfortunately, we're not able to do that.
It's a whole different economic structure. And that's, Mitch, I'm going to turn back to you on an economic question. Sometimes consumers do have the ability to go directly to the farm. We have farmers markets in many communities around East Central Illinois. Tell me the economics of that. Is that a good thing to be able to go and go to a farmer's market and buy direct?
Oh, I think it is. I think it is. I think that's directly from the farmer's field to your table. I think that's fresh, and I think it's good, and I see nothing wrong with that at all. I think one thing that we have to remember is I think that food coming to a consumer's table is safe. That's the one thing that we always have to remember. I think it's safe. Abraham Lincoln said once that the USDA is actually is America's department. Every consumer, I think, has said that uses the USDA 3 times a day. 3 times a day because of the food processing that happens and the safety and the quality of water. So it's America's department, actually, when we think of USDA.
Chris, I know as you produce the commodities on your farm, give us an example of a commodity that might be direct marketed to consumers, or like on your farm, you have some products that make it to the consumer's table, but in a roundabout way.
Yes, I do contract with a company that produces corn chips, and so that's kind of a unique contract marketing system that is unique, and it's not a bulk commodity that we're selling to a Cargill or an ADM, but it is an interesting concept that is actually going into a bag. So where consumers go and buy a bag of Tostitos or that type of product, I can take some pride in knowing that I contributed to that.
Well, whether the American farmer is involved in filling up your corn chip bag or your ethanol in your fuel tank, which of course is another agricultural product that's made a lot here in Illinois, as our folks have seen today, it's a very complex problem, and but a great opportunity, and one that we're proud to be a part of. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us today, and we thank our viewers today for watching as they learn more about agriculture. Turn in next time to Champaign County Agriculture Today. I'm your host, Dennis Riggs. Thanks for watching.